How we doing today? Thanks for being here. It is Ivy Nation Sports Talk. We're up and we are running. We're going to start with a conversation today with sports media podcaster and writer Bryan Curtis from the Press Box podcast at The Ringer. Since Notre Dame training camp starts next week, we're going to be getting a lot more serious. We try to keep it fun, but we're going to be talking pretty much wall-to-wall football. So I thought it would be kind of fun end of this week. We've had a lot of different interviews this summer, obviously, to have someone like Bryan. We're going to, kind of lighten it up even more. We're going to talk about some different college football TV and media topics, including the Notre Dame NBC TV booth, Jason Garrett specifically, and some other things regarding that. We talked Paul Finebaum, a bunch of other college football TV topics. Jesse's going to join me after that for some rapid fire. And of course, we've got a lot of Notre Dame topics there. One thing, I will say, Bryan is not, and I'm talking about Bryan Curtis, my guest, not Brian Driscoll, of course. Bryan Curtis is not a sports media reporter. I'm using air quotes here, as you can see on the show. He is not a reporter. He more or less comments on different media topics, most of them sports media topics. So, we didn't get into, this is pre-recorded. I had to talk to him yesterday because of his schedule. He was actually in England and then came back. He lives out west. He is actually on the East Coast right now. So he took some time, and we do obviously appreciate it for him to join us. But he's not a sports media reporter. He's a commenter on sports media. So we didn't get into, like what's going to happen with the Notre Dame contract and all that kind of stuff. We talk more about, again, Jason Garrett specifically in the booth and those kind of things. So again, here's Bryan Curtis from The Ringer, a lot of college football media topics that we're going to get into. And then Jesse's going to join me right after that for some rapid fire. Well, Bryan Curtis is with us, and he's an editor at large and the host of the Press Box podcast at The Ringer. Bryan, appreciate you coming on today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sean. This is my official start of football season, I'll have you know.
That's right. That is right. Like we're on the eve of Notre Dame training camp starting next week. So we're going to be hitting the face with this even quicker than we want. They're starting around the time NFL training camps are starting right now. So
it's here. I feel we've all been in this game of chicken all summer for the first one of us to say it's football season. We all desperately wanted to be football season. Let's just say it right now. It's football season. Here we go.
That's right. We drag on for weeks on end with little to no content, and now that it's here, we're ready for it. So
absolutely.
Well, you are the bulk of your content there with what you do at The Ringer is focused on sports media. I'm curious, before we kind of jump into a conversation about some college football media, how did you get into media coverage?
A terrible sickness going all the way back to childhood when I first started reading the sports page. I think it was in second or third grade. And I just remember, in the old days, of course, I grew up in Dallas-Fort Worth. So the giant 30-page Sunday sports sections, and I'd grab it, and there'd be a huge picture of a Dallas Cowboys player or Texas Rangers player, whoever it was in the front. And I'd look down at the little driver's license sized photo of the columnist. And I just think, well, I wonder what he's like. Who cares about the quarterback here? I wonder what this guy wrote the articles like. I have no idea why I thought that, other than I wanted to be a sports writer. And then I started writing about people like that, and it has become a very happy, if unlikely, career.
Did you look up to Rudy Martzke, back in the day? Or
he was the king.
Yeah.
And I could, back in those days, of course, there was no internet. So like getting your hands on a USA Today and, finding out the news about Paul McGuire and Phil Simms. I mean, that was it, baby.
the critique of the broadcasts and all that kind of
Yeah,
good
A
stuff.
plus. You'd have
That's
like
right.
toughest takes. Remember that? There would be somebody on an NFL
Right.
pregame show who said absolutely nothing. Like, yeah, the Bengals need to play better. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Well, as you mentioned, you're from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and you are a Texas alum, or as they say in Texas, you're a Texas X, I guess.
That's right.
So, how important was Texas football to your college experience?
It was the most important thing, if we're being honest. I mean, I was certainly excited to go down there because of the school and Austin and journalism opportunities. But I remember we had a thing at our freshman orientation. You could pick anything you wanted to tour. And I chose a stadium. Like, I didn't choose the communication school. Like, I was like, well, I want to see where I'm going to be sitting Saturday afternoon. And that was like I was a recruit or something. And that was, and I tell people that who, let us say, went to more prestigious East Coast universities. And I think I'm kidding. And I said, no, I'm really not. It was also my freshman year was the first year of the Big 12, which at the time was quite a glamorous super conference and something I'd never seen growing up in Texas. Hey, it's Nebraska and Oklahoma. We're all in the same place.
Right.
That was it for me. That's why I wanted to go there, because I thought, you know what, for 4 years, I'm going to have football every Saturday. And oh, by the way, there's a sophomore named Ricky Williams, and that should be a lot of fun too. Turned out.
I was going to say, I was wrapping up school about the time that you were starting then at the University of Kansas. And I remember they had a couple decent seasons when Glenn Mason was there. Mm-hmm. And so a couple of us, usually you didn't have to buy season tickets to Kansas football. That's historically, obviously. But, they had a good season, so we bought tickets. And I remember going to see the Texas Longhorns come to town with Ricky Williams and Priest Holmes in the backfield. That was quite a team. Yeah.
That was so fun.
Are you excited? Last year in the Big 12, are you excited for the SEC next year? How are you feeling about that?
I was a little, I don't know if bummed is the right word, but I was a little thrown when the announcement first came down, because after, what is it now, 25 plus years, I'd finally kind of gotten used to the Big 12 and was enjoying all those rivalries. And the SEC, look, it's a fantastic place to be. It seems weird to complain about your school going to the SEC, but I don't have any natural affinity for playing Ole Miss and Florida and Georgia. Now, when I saw the schedule for 2024, it looks awesome. I mean, there's some big schools playing each other every single week. I'm also scared as a Texas fan. I don't know if the phrase Texas is back has any resonance at all to you, Sean, but
no one's ever heard that before. What are you talking about? No one's ever said Texas is
not
back.
Against the Irish at all. And I don't know, but I don't know if you know, we're not back and have not been back since that phrase was uttered. So the idea of playing those schools every week, despite Texas is really hanging in quite well against Alabama last year, is pretty scary to me.
It seems, and we were looking at those schedules when they released next year's, what that first year for Texas and Oklahoma are going to look like. I mean, it's not very easy. I mean, it seems like with realignment, so much of it is obviously TV driven with the contracts and everything else. I mean, if nothing else, it seems like with Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC and USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten, seems like consumers are going to probably enjoy what they get out of this with those moves.
I don't see how you can't. I mean, and you and I both know that in college football, it's important for those teams to be good, but first it's important for those teams to be big national and regional brands that just have fan bases that show up every week. And part of college football is fun, even when you're not as good as you want to be. So again, it's hard to look at a schedule that has all those games every week. And you mentioned the Big Ten too, and just be like, oh, wow, this is going to be fun. I can't wait.
Exactly. We're both Cowboys fans. And
speaking of not being back. Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know if you saw the news today that speaking of, Irish and Zack Martin, one of the best players they've had for going on a decade now, is talking about holding out. That's not, fun when training camp starts next week. But Jason Garrett, he made the move to TV last year when he joined the NBC crew. And of course, he did some stuff on Sundays with the NFL, and he did Notre Dame games as the booth analyst on Saturdays. What did you think of year one of Jason Garrett last year?
I don't know what you think about this as a fellow Cowboy fan, but I remember hearing for years that Jason Garrett has a great sense of humor. You don't see it at the press conferences, but trust me, when you get him off, he has a great sense of humor. And I remember going to Cowboys training camp out in California a couple years ago, and I listened to him off the podium. You know, we did a little off the record thing for a couple minutes. I was like 5% funnier than normal Jason Garrett. And I kind of thought the same thing about his NBC work, to be honest. I thought it was about, 5 to 10% funnier than the Jason Garrett we have on the podium. Like he's okay, I just don't know that he's ever going to really be able to let it rip in the sense that is going to make it a truly great announcer. It just feels to me he's good at explaining football. He's clearly enthusiastic about being there, which we've had announcers that kind of don't want to be there.
Right.
It just feels like the seat belt is on when Jason Garrett is talking to the public. And maybe that's just him. Maybe, and I just thought that when he was doing Notre Dame, I thought that when he was doing the studio show last year, the same thing.
I agree. He was at least a little bit better than I thought he was going to be, but at the same time, the seatbelt analogy is probably kind of the best way to go. I don't think, especially from the Notre Dame broadcast standpoint, I mean, you had Jason Garrett, a rookie analyst, and he's paired up with, a very raw rookie, Jack Collinsworth, doing the play-by-play. I don't think, like, if Mike Tirico had been there, I feel like maybe he could maybe bring a little bit more out of him. I think it's probably tougher when you're talking about two rookies in the booth at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. We saw Mike Tirico do a playoff game with Drew Brees. So, he's got experience trying to do it. Absolutely.
That's right. It irks a lot of people, of course, that Notre Dame has its own TV contract, but it also irks a lot of Notre Dame fans that they've got this 3 decades long, running deal contract with NBC, but they've never had a Notre Dame alum as an analyst in the booth. I'm curious, as again, as a media observer, someone who's really into this kind of stuff. What do you think? How Notre Dame should a Notre Dame TV broadcast be?
It's a great question. I mean, it's been something, as you point out, since the 90s that has blown people's minds. I mean, I remember when it first happened, but Notre Dame has their own TV channel. And of course, now that sounds sort of anachronistic, right? Everybody in some way or another has their own streaming channel and all kinds of channels, right? I would think NBC has always wanted to approach that as a national broadcast. We have one of the handful of college football teams that can be considered a national college football team, right? It has its own fan base, but it's a national team. And we're going to produce this like a national broadcast, meaning like a broadcast that's going to be like the ABC game of the week and the ESPN Saturday night game and the CBS SEC Saturday afternoon game, and not as a game that's tailored necessarily to Notre Dame fans. And I really think that's how you have to do it, and of course the interest in that broadcast is going to go up and down to some extent based on how good Notre Dame is. That's just natural. But I don't, the idea of sort of tailoring it on that big a scale, even now, even with the shrunken state of the networks, I just think would be a little bit much, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, Brady Quinn is, he's always been a favorite son, but he's one that always comes up, and he's got a pretty good gig, with what he's doing right now on Fox, though.
And that's a good name, right? He's somebody who would be really good at that. I think I like him a lot. But yeah, if you can't get him, I'm not really sure. Trying to go down the mental roster of Notre Dame. Is Aaron Taylor still available? Right?
You never know. He might be. I think he's doing something for CBS Sports.
Yeah.
The Golics are one that I think, and they actually live in town part time anyway. I think that they would jump on that. But Big Mike, Mike Senior is doing a lot, some radio stuff, I think, still, and that kind of thing. But
yeah, they'd be very natural ones to do it. And see, that's where you could do it, where it'd be Notre Dame, but also, especially in Mike Senior's case, Mike Junior's case too, big national personalities.
Yeah. And I feel like them, Mike Senior, especially because of how long he did Mike and Mike. One, he's got, sort of his own brand appeal, but he also, when you have a job like that for 2 decades, I mean, they would play up the Notre Dame shtick, but I also feel like he learned how to sort of walk the line with some objectivity, with that job that he had.
Totally. Yeah. He's a pro. And it'd just be fun too, because I think a lot of people miss him from the radio and have been kind of waiting for him to get I know he does podcasts and you said the radio stuff, calling games, but for him to get a big job like that would be cool.
I think it's going to be interesting with NBC adding these primetime Big Ten games. There's going to be, again, like if we're talking about Booth, you still have a fairly raw Booth doing the Notre Dame games, at least for this season, but the Big Ten games are going to have Todd Blackledge, who's been doing it for a long time, and Noah Eagle, who, even though I don't know how much you've seen him, like he's done some of those Nickelodeon games the last couple of years, but you can tell that the apple didn't fall far from the tree with Noah Eagle and Ian Eagle. I think that's going to be a really good Booth on Saturdays this season.
Definitely. And I listened to him do Clipper games back home, and he's really, really good. I mean, one of these guys, and again, there's the Ian connection for sure. And he's talked about that, but also just these guys come out of Syracuse and you're just like, oh my gosh, they just feel like they're ready to be the next Mike Tirico right away. And he's one of those guys who absolutely will do it. And I think it's interesting to do. Todd Blackledge is the ultimate veteran, right? Hasn't he done every network now? CBS, ESPN, NBC.
Probably so. Yeah.
And then you get somebody like Noah who's super young and pair them together. That's fun.
Yeah, I think so too. He's really good for as young as he is. But then, like you said, the guys come out of Syracuse and they're ready to go. We grew up though with guys like Keith Jackson and Brent Musburger forever. And I mean, even like Vern Lundquist, I think you can probably throw him in there. Sure. Does it kind of feel like, do you miss kind of having, like, especially, whether it's Buck or Michaels or, most of the NFL booths, it's like, it's a big game feel when they're doing games. Does it feel like college is maybe missing a little bit of that without some of those guys, like I just mentioned?
So I go back and forth on this. I definitely think there's something to that in all sports, by the way, not just college football. But I think what's changed is it's not that the announcers have gotten small. It's that television has gotten smaller on us. It used to be when we were listening to Keith Jackson say, oh, it's going to be an old-fashioned shooting match out here, Texas, Oklahoma on the Red River. The world was just a lot smaller, right? We really had 3 networks, almost 4 networks. We had cable television, but the audiences of those games were so big that it made every announcer seem big. Not just the great ones like the ones you mentioned, but the ones who were solid B pluses and hung around for 4 decades too. So, to me, I mean, when this is a little bit of an aside, but when Jeff Van Gundy got laid off from ESPN the other day, I was shocked to see he did 17 NBA finals in a row. I mean, think of that.
I didn't realize he'd been around that long. Yeah.
Yeah. Who was that big, quote unquote, who didn't eat nearly that many as an analyst. And there's some play-by-play guys, but never anybody as an analyst who did anything like 17 finals. So I just think it's the way, I almost think, Sean, it's like a perception thing about TV. It feels smaller because the world is, broken up into a million pieces rather than these guys actually being smaller.
Do you have a favorite right now?
I really like the Saturday night game, Fowler and Herbie, and I really like how that game is produced. I just think if you talk about big time feel, under the lights, it's mostly a night game. They do some afternoon games, but it just is produced with this real cinematic feel to it. And I just watch that game, that ESPN theme music, and I get really excited to watch college football, even if I'm not super locked into that matchup. Vern doing the CBS games until he retired. I saw Vern last year down in Austin. I mean, Vern's voice for CBS on Saturday afternoons, got me fired up too. But yeah, probably the Saturday night ESPN game right now.
Yeah, Vern, old Cowboys, I think. Didn't he used to do radio back in
the day,
I think, as well?
He was a local sports guy too when I was a kid in Dallas.
Wow.
At 10 o'clock.
So, you mentioned Fowler and Herb Street. Fowler's not on Game Day anymore. Obviously, Herb Street still is. I mean, it's been around for a long time. I've been pretty impressed with how, I was skeptical if Fox could kind of make any real inroads with this big noon pregame. How would you maybe kind of compare those two shows, Game Day versus Big Noon?
it's a big lift for Big Noon to try to come in and knock that off. I mean, that show's just been on the air for so long. I think Big Noon is a totally solid show. Could watch that. I enjoy Rob Stone. I enjoy the personalities on that show. I know we swapped out Reggie Bush for Mark Ingram coming up into this year. I think the big difference for pregame shows these days is who's the person you really want to hear what they have to say on a pregame show. You know, sometimes that's a reporter because they have scoops and stuff like that. A lot of times it's an analyst. And I find if I'm choosing between those shows, it's really the ones I want to hear are on game day. You know, I want to hear what Herbie has to say. Pat McAfee, because he might say something really funny or just go off on some tangent that seems really good, right? Like, and then the headgear at the end. Right. So I just feel that the must watch, the thing that I'm going to regret missing, in addition, by the way, to just a lot of production magic that they've cultivated over the decades, is still with game day for me.
Well, and I mean, a lot of people, you know, like you want to hear maybe what Herb Street has to say because you're trying to, you know, like fans want to sit there and go, well, he hates our team and that kind of stuff. And I heard you and Ryan Russillo recently had a really good conversation about that, you know, that kind of goes back to his time at ESPN when he would hear from, you know, a lot of fans of a lot of different teams. And, you know, I kind of feel like, isn't the real test of bias, you know, like, do most fans actually detect any bias? Like if they're, other than at a time when they're watching their own team, like if they're watching a game that doesn't involve their team, does their radar go up and go, he's biased against this team? It seems like, you know, it only happens when their team is actually the one that, you know, they're ingesting whatever information about.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? And they're never worried if the announcer is biased for their team.
Right.
You know, if he goes on there and sings the praises of you for an hour, then, oh, well, he's just finally calling it down the middle. Nobody thinks. And I'm just amazed how people never forget this stuff. I mean, I subscribe to Texas message boards, and it's like, you know, whenever Herbie comes up, there's some clip about Charlie Strong that he said, you know, I'm like, wow, I haven't really thought about Charlie Strong in years, and yet you're remembering something he said.
Some slight of Charlie Strong.
Yeah, or the program or whatever. And it's like, whoa.
You know, I heard I think you coined this term. I'd never heard of it before. Bummage, the concept of, I think what you call bummage. And it seems like you see more of this in college broadcasts than in professional broadcasts. Can you explain to our listeners and viewers the concept of bummage?
So it comes from behind the scenes people that produce the games out in the truck outside the stadium. And what they like to see, in addition to joy, in addition to happy players celebrating, is sadness. Players dejected after making a play. You know, in the NFL, you look at those Fox broadcasts, and right when the quarterback does an interception, they'll show a replay and it's in super slow-mo, and his face is just rotating like this, and he looks just anguished. And then, of course, the college version we get are usually fans in the stands, right, looking really, really upset. And my take on that has always been, I remember from my own college years, I remember doing things like that and having no, you know, idea, right, that I would be on camera. Like that certainly wasn't the goal. But you were, I always think, doing it in a very public way. You were playing to the fans around you. You were playing to your little section of the stadium. You know, we always think of it as, oh, this person has been caught completely unawares by the camera. They have no idea that they're doing surrender, cobra, whatever it is.
Right.
But to me, I was always very aware of I was doing it. I was aware because we were all in this thing together where we were emoting and mad and or happy or elated or whatever. And I always think college fans know exactly what they're doing most of the time when those things happen, you know, and you'll see them, they'll have their thing here and they're looking over at their friend like that.
Right.
You know, they're not unaware. They're totally aware. They may be unaware they're on TV, but they're totally aware of what they're doing.
I always wonder where the cameras are, you know, like, are they all the way across the field? How close are you know, some people seem to know, but then others seem to have no clue exactly where they are.
So the answer is usually all the way across. And there's certain cameras that have fan responsibilities on certain plays because the ball's way away from them. So they're looking. And their job is to find those people and put them on television. Yeah. You know, that's the goal, right? Because it's become such a funny part of college football TV.
bowl season and March Madness. It's just it's like play crowd shot, play crowd shot.
Oh, and they all become famous, these people
the
for
memes,
years and
that's right.
years.
That's exactly right. I wanted to ask you about Paul Finebaum. I know you've had him on your show in the past, and he's interesting, I think, when you look at the media landscape, because he got his start as a newspaper guy, and like a lot of sports reporters, sort of migrated to radio, and that eventually became TV. But Finebaum seems so unique to me because, correct me if I'm wrong, he seems like the only guy who's really kind of made that big a move specific to college football, like a college football content maker. What do you think makes Paul Finebaum one of one, basically?
Yeah, certainly that's very, very focused on college football. I
Right.
think McAfee plays in that sandbox, right? But it's not quite the same. Well, I think a couple of things. One is just the growth of the SEC, right? I mean, he would be the first to tell you that as the SEC becomes the dominant conference in America, again, something that would have been just laughable when I was a kid, when the SEC was winning few to no national championships. He's riding that wave like everybody else, because you have all of a sudden all these people around the country like me who are like, wait a second, the SEC's number one. Well, who's going to be our pundit and interpreter and guy screening calls from some of the most colorful sports radio callers in history? And it turns out to be Paul. And Paul's also just very, very good at, the medium, right? Like, he's a good radio host. He knows how to get attention. He knows how to get a reaction. He has fun doing it. And he's also the point where coaches who he will have criticized will just come on his show, and come right back on there. It's kind of amazing.
I've watched more of him this week. He's been doing his show from the SEC media days and just kind of watching that, in the background as I do some other stuff. He's much more calm, I think, than I anticipated.
Yes.
Like, I don't watch him a lot, but he definitely, like, just the personality and some of the stuff that you hear from him, it's a different demeanor, I think, than what I was expecting.
Much more downbeat, isn't it, than if you just read quotes from Paul Finebaum?
Right.
You'd imagine somebody ranting and raving or whatever, but his delivery is very almost deadpan. But he winds up. But what he says when you listen to it, it's great.
There's a teeth to that. Yeah, that's exactly right. From a watching college football standpoint, live games, is there anything that you would change or would want to see differently from the way TV networks broadcast a college football game?
It's funny. I've been thinking about this with the baseball games being radically shortened this season. I'm like, is there a point where us who are just complete sicko college football fans are going to be like, you know what, 4.5 hours is just a smidge too much?
A little bit.
I don't know that I'm totally there yet, because especially if it's Texas, I'm locked in and hey, what else do I have to do? But it's a long time to invest. And I think, whenever they have these periodic kind of panics where kids at schools aren't going to college football games, the fact that it's 4.5 hours or 4 hours or whatever it is, we have to at some point just kind of wrestle that down a little bit. No, I don't know. Gosh, I mean, of course, I have gripes about announcers and presentation, and I find, especially college football, when you're off the top 25, the announcing experience can be quite a ride. You don't know what you're getting.
Right.
As a kid, we'd be on the Fox directional network, a couple times a year, and I'd be like, "Holy mackerel, this is different." It's not Keith Jackson. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But mostly to me, college football is almost like a pizza buffet, the kind that I don't sadly get to eat anymore, but I used to eat when I was in college, where you're going in for mass, right? You're going in for quantity.
That's true.
Not necessarily quality. And so, I'll have my notes on the broadcast and all that stuff, but mostly I'm just pigging out and loving it.
You've covered WrestleMania, and I think you've been to Super Bowl Radio Row for a couple of years now. Is there an event you haven't covered that you would like to cover?
That's a good one. I've probably, the ones I miss are big college football games. My beat, I'll go out to stadiums here and there, and I always want to go to more. But yeah, if I had anything, it'd be the college football playoff. And it'd be, you know what it would be? It would be a big college, whatever the big college football game every week is. That's what I want to do. Super Bowl's fun. I've done that a couple times, and the Radio Row stuff is a great blast because it's just kind of crazy. But there's nothing like college football games, especially college football games in home stadiums. I mean, to me, that's just the most fun thing in the world. Like I said, that's why I went to college where I did. Yeah. And I think that's what I'd want to do on a more regular basis if I was going somewhere.
I think that's what's gonna. I think there's going to be extra excitement with this 12-team format, with getting some of these games on campus and kind of getting some of that atmosphere. I think that's really going to, you know, some people still don't like it, but I think that's actually going to be a good thing overall, getting some of these important games like you were talking about on campuses.
The only ones that are just dead to me are the ones when you have these some of these early season, you know, special matchups in Jerry World in Dallas or in Arlington.
Right.
And you're just looking at it, just like, this place looks dead. You know, I've been on the team to keep Texas, Oklahoma out of Dallas Cowboys facilities now for 20 years, however long we've been talking about this. Cause like, I want to be in the middle of the state fair. I want to be in a stadium that feels like it's literally about to fall down every time you climb into it. That's fun, you know, and home stadiums, right? Even better. Like there's so much there, right? Away from that corporate-y NFL feeling atmosphere. That's where college football ought to be played.
Bryan, we predicted what Texas is going to do this season earlier this week on our show. Are the Longhorns back? Where are they? Are they back?
I think they are back in the technical sense that they could compete for a conference title this year. It's kind of all up to Quinn Ewers. Steve Sarkisian, who I am very much on the fence about as a coach, is an excellent recruiter and has recruited lights out at Texas so far, especially at the quarterback position. But I think, you know, if Quinn Ewers comes in and has, you know, last year he had some moments of brilliance, and then especially toward the end of the season, a lot of moments of just blah. He plays well this year. Texas could be a really good team this year. I don't know if a playoff team, but certainly a Big 12 champion kind of team this year.
This is what, third coach now removed from Mac Brown, I believe. You went Herman and then Strong, who you mentioned, and now Sarkisian. Is it just a matter of recruit? You know, like, do you feel any? You said you're on the fence about Sarkisian. Do you have any better feel for him than you had for those previous two guys?
I think he's a good recruit. I think he's a better recruiter. I think the recruiting of those guys kind of went up and down. I think Sark has a real good eye for recruiting and a real good eye for quarterbacks. But as a game day coach, I have no better feel for him than I had anybody before him.
Interesting.
Absolutely not. I mean, he's not earned it. You know, Texas thrown away a lot of good games. And again, this is Texas, right? And the part of the joy of growing up in Texas is that I had low expectations. Like I knew I was not going to the national championship factory when I signed up to go to UT.
But I guess you were out of school, but you got a couple, you know, national championship, you know, one championship and one other game, right?
One other game. So, you know, again, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it just doesn't. Texas just never had that tradition. You know, you look back at it. Even took Darrell Royal. Other than Darrell Royal, it wasn't really. Texas hadn't been very good. You know, or certainly great for an extended period of time. So, my expectations are tempered.
Yeah, trust me, there are a lot of Notre Dame fans who would take that one championship that you were talking about.
There was one game, right? If I remember right, against Bama.
That's right. That's right. One game, didn't ended up a little bit more lopsided than that.
Some playoff appearances, you know.
So. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Bryan Curtis from the Press Box podcast at The Ringer, editor at large at The Ringer as well. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you doing this today. Thank you.
Anytime. Great fun to talk to you, Sean.
All right, so that's Bryan Curtis again from the Press Box podcast. You can check out his stuff. They usually drop a couple pods per week, Mondays and Fridays. They're dropping them a lot of different sports media topics, especially now that football is getting ready to start up. So you can always check them out there. And bring it in right now, Mr. Irish, Jesse Stiers. You're wearing your hat. Your head already looks better than Lane Kiffin looked at SEC Media Days today. Did you happen to see any of his appearance at SEC Media Day?
I didn't. Today has been a busy work day, so I have been off the phone and everything pretty much all day.
He was very tan, but he literally looked like he rolled out of bed, threw on, nice looking suit, but the hair was a bit disheveled. The hair looks like yours looks sometimes when you're not wearing the hat. So
that's why I wear the hat.
Right.
He obviously didn't. It's one of those things. It feels like Lane Kiffin just picks and chooses what he cares about, in my opinion. And if he doesn't,
fair.
And if he doesn't care, he's like, it's like very obvious. You know what I mean? Like there's no like in between. It's either like one extreme or the other. It feels like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jess, are you ready for rapid fire?
I've been thinking about all day what I've been missing out on, and rapid fire is the answer. It's the last piece of the puzzle to my day.
Is this going to bring the juice for you? Is it going to jack it up a notch?
It is. It is going to turn it up. I'm going to order some takeout wings after this, and I'm going to watch the Cubs play the Cardinals 8 times in the span of 10 games coming up. It's kind of crazy. They have a 4-game set, and then 2 with the White Sox, and then another 4-game set with the Cardinals. So a lot of Cardinal game coming up.
Maybe the last days of Cody Bellinger in a Cubs uniform coming up.
Well, we'll see. If they can get to about 500 by the deadline, I think there's a good chance that they might not sell it all off. But Bellinger makes the most sense because he's on that 1-year deal, right? So if you can flip a 1-year deal for a top 100 prospect, why not?
Hey, we shall see. Everyone's talking right now. Bellinger is the big one they're talking about. Marcus Stroman is next in line, whether or not he's going to see the door. We talked a little bit about Paul Goldschmidt in rapid fire last night. Someone asked us if we thought that the Cardinals would trade him. So, going to start seeing some names changing addresses here pretty soon. Well, let's get into some Notre Dame football talk. Fill in the blank. You would fill blank about Notre Dame's upcoming season if Tyler Buchner was still the quarterback and Sam Hartman had never transferred to Notre Dame.
If Tyler Buchner was still the quarterback for this upcoming season, I would still feel well about Notre Dame's chances to be a playoff team, essentially. I don't think much changes. I just think the predominant thing that Sam Hartman brings is just overall experience. And then I do also think that the playbook is going to look relatively different, with Buchner and Hartman at the helm. So I think what it would look like is you would see a lot more RPO type reads and 10, 15-yard routes, I would say. But with Hartman at quarterback, you're going to see mainly play action, not a ton of RPO. I still think they'll do a little bit. But you're going to see obviously way more downfield balls, way more downfield shots. And I obviously feel more comfortable with Hartman, in a third and fourth quarter game if you're potentially in a close one with Ohio State, USC, Clemson, or potentially you're down against Ohio State, USC, Clemson. That's the type of quarterback you want, a guy with a ton of experience. So I would still feel relatively well. I wouldn't feel as well. And Notre Dame wouldn't be as well off. They would be in a worse situation, in my opinion.
D-Troll says Jesse is on the drugs. And I think
an intervention
says we need to intervene. And I'm not far off from you, D-Troll. So with Hartman, I think they're at least a 10-2 team with a 12-0 ceiling and a floor of 9-3. That's with Sam Hartman right now. If Tyler Buchner were still here, I think it's, you're more like 9-3, a ceiling of probably 10-2, and a floor of 8-4. So again, with Hartman, it's an undefeated, 12-0 ceiling. With Buchner, I think it's a ceiling of 10-2. If Tyler Buchner was still here, I think that there would be more questions about what's still a largely inexperienced quarterback because of the fact that he obviously got hurt last year, missed 10 straight weeks, 10 straight games after the injury against Marshall, who, had a good Gator Bowl after missing all that, but he still threw 3 interceptions in the game. All of them his fault? No, but still 3 interceptions. No matter what, we know that, right? As Cowboys Dak Prescott fans, we know tip balls don't matter, that kind of stuff. An interception
only goes to one position on the stat sheet.
That's exactly right. And 5 interceptions in 83 pass attempts last year. That's an interception in every 16 attempts that Tyler Buchner had. Big disparity from the much more experienced Sam Hartman, and I know there's some people who talk about, well, he threw 12 interceptions. That's an issue. 428 pass attempts Sam Hartman had last year. That's an interception every 35 attempts. So that's like twice as many pass attempts for Sam Hartman to throw an interception as it is for Tyler Buchner. Hartman's got a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Buchner, 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He's got a negative ratio, unfortunately, for last year. So, this is going to be a high-scoring offense this year, and it's one that's going to complement the defense better. So, again, Buchner, talented guy, but you're still talking about probably working through some growing pains, and that's what we would be talking about. Like if Tyler Buchner were still here, we'd be talking about, can he get past this interceptions? Like how much has he grown since that Gator Bowl? We obviously would have had a little bit of spring practice to base some of that stuff on, but we'd still be talking about, is that a thing of the past for Tyler Buchner versus, with Hartman, it's a much more finished product, obviously.
So based off of all of that, how many added wins does Sam Hartman give you? Cumulative, like net. How many net wins does...
Like I said, with Sam Hartman, I think it's you're starting off at it with a 10-2 team. That's what I think, with a ceiling of 12-0. If it was Tyler Buchner, I think you're 9-3 with a only a 1-win improvement type ceiling, 10-2. I think the floor for Hartman is 9-3. I think the floor for Buchner is around.
So the floor of Hartman is equal to Buchner's ceiling at 10-2.
Right. Exactly.
So at Buchner's best,
roughly, anyway,
that's not going to be better than Sam Hartman's.
I think because of the fact that you're, better athlete in Tyler Buchner, but because of the fact that he is far from a finished product as a passer. Like they're talking in Alabama. I've been, again, like I was talking with Bryan Curtis there, I've been watching a lot of the SEC media days on the SEC network this week. And, they've had Alabama guy, Nick Saban wasn't going to talk about it, obviously, but the different Alabama reporters and stuff they've had on, they don't think Tyler Buchner is going to be the guy. There was a guy on today who said he thinks that they basically brought Tyler Buchner in to be an insurance policy. And that's basically what he was here. So like, if that's what ends up being the case, like it's a wash for Tyler Buchner. He would have been just as well off staying here with an opportunity to potentially be the starter next year. Whereas if he's not the starter this year, the odds that he's going to be the starter at Alabama are pretty slim. I think there's a greater chance that he ends up transferring someplace else. So I just go ahead.
He got some bad advice, I think. And I don't advocate for, sitting out a year, but if you aren't going to play at Alabama, you're not going to get a real second shot again as a transfer. They're going to have someone, by the time the next season starts. And so it's really confusing to me that Buchner just didn't stay because, again, he was going to see the field in some fashion, and the ability to really learn from Sam Hartman. I think he would have had the complete keys to the offense next year, but it's going to be if he doesn't get the job at Alabama, it's going to be even worse off for himself. He hurt himself even more by going to Alabama.
He might still end up in some kind of package down there, but again, like, how is that any different than if he were still here? It's if he doesn't win the job, which again, now, like, it could change maybe by week 3 or 4, it changes. It's going to be really curious because, again, like all these people who cover Alabama football who I've seen down there talking about it this week, seem to think that it's going to be, either Simpson or Milroe. But like they also, all these guys are saying that this is the worst quarterback situation that Nick Saban has had basically since he started down there in Alabama. So
I really feel horrible for him.
Yeah. We've got more Saban talk coming up in a little bit, by the way. So Bryan Kelly got into some of the differences between being at LSU and being at Notre Dame when he was on Sirius XM radio this week. Here's what he had to say. Quote, "The environment that's created and then the welcoming of the family to it, it becomes like I've never done this before. I became a fan." He's talking, of course, about being at LSU. "I don't know what a fan is like, right? I usually have them throw stuff at me, but to sit with my wife and family at a baseball game and watch it and be a fan is something I've never had in my career." End quote. So that's Bryan Kelly. What do you think about his comments there, Jess?
I thought that those comments were filled with a lot of shade. I wasn't surprised. He could almost be, carrying an umbrella with him because of how much shade he's throwing. And
this came on the heels, like he was talking more specifically prior to that about, some specific differences between Notre Dame, because of course everyone brings up, asks him about it. But go ahead.
To me, it just feels like kind of, again, this is how I'm taking the comments. It's almost like he's saying during his time at Notre Dame, the football program was kind of what he did and got entrenched in and was like the main thing here. And relatively everyone else just there was no interest because they weren't as good. But now that he's at LSU and, baseball is good and, all these other things, basketball are good. He's basically saying that he's become a fan of it, right? Like, because he's got the opportunity to go watch them. They're successful. They're good. He's become a fan of LSU. So to say that he was not a fan of Notre Dame, I think, again, is that's what he's saying in a roundabout way. He was only there to coach football and everything else he really wasn't a fan of. But at LSU, it seems like there's more success and interest of things around him. And football is not just like the number one overriding thing. So he's actually a fan of these other things. So it seems kind of, again, very shady and not necessary, but that's how I took the comments.
No one told Bryan Kelly he couldn't go to, other teams' games when he was at Notre Dame and be a fan. Like Marcus Freeman in year one, he was at Notre Dame women's basketball games. He was sitting front row with his family, with his wife sometimes, with his son sometimes, and, staff members and stuff like that. He got on the plane and he flew to Greensboro to the ACC women's basketball tournament to watch him play out there. He was at the men's lacrosse national championship game. He's been at basketball games. He's been all over the place. Marcus Freeman is, no one told Bryan Kelly he couldn't do that when he was here. So now it's like he's saying, well, I'm at LSU and I can do that stuff now. It's like, I know that, it's a great environment. It's a different kind of environment at an LSU baseball game at Alex Box Stadium compared to X Stadium here at Notre Dame. And it's obviously a lot warmer as well, but there was nothing keeping him from going to any of those games. If he wanted to, he could have done it, like we talked about this before. He could have gone to Omaha the first weekend that LSU was playing in the College World Series instead of waiting until the championship series when they were one win away from clinching a national championship. And he used it as a social media moment to let everybody know that he was going there to watch them try to win a national championship, but he didn't. He waited until the end when everyone could see him. And to me, that's what it's all about with Bryan Kelly more than anything. He very well could have done it here at Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman is doing it here at Notre Dame. Kelly could have done it. He didn't. And, again, now, like you're saying, he wants to throw the shade back. It's like, I don't get it. I don't get it. He's just, kind of constantly throwing these jabs out. Cause like in the same interview, he was talking about, well, I don't have to wear a tie down here now. It's not as stuffy and, all this different stuff. It's just, I think that's it, Michael. Bryan Kelly chose easy. He very well could have done any of this stuff here at Notre Dame. He chose not to, but I'm sure he's also, became pretty popular in year one like speaking of choosing easy, it's easy because, he was like big man on campus because they had a nice season. They won the West and all that different stuff. And he wanted to go out there and kind of show himself and gloat a little bit in public. So,
I mean, he chose the easier path that paid more money. And
right. Brian Kelly chose easy. Marcus Freeman chose authentic. And that's what Marcus Freeman is. So fill in the blank. Audric Estime averaged 5.9 yards per carry last season. His yards per carry this season will be blank.
His yards per carry this season will be 5.4. I think he's going to lose a half a yard per carry. And I didn't know if you knew this, but where that landed him number 28th nationally last year in his yards per carry. The only reason why I think his yard per carry is going to go down is I think he's going to see the majority of the workload this season. And I just think there is going to be a little bit of natural regression. So I think it's ultimately going to go down, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it goes up 0.5. So
okay,
my range is kind of.
So you're plus or minus. You're leaning toward the down, but you could just as easily see it pop up.
I could see it pop up because of the fact of a more downfield passing game. And when teams are kind of cheating downfield, it's going to naturally open up the box a little bit for him. I just don't know, is he going to be able to effectively manage a larger workload this season? So that is, I guess, that's the teeter of, the plus 0.5, the fact that he has a more downfield passing game and the box should be a little bit looser. But then again, that means his workload is going to be up a little bit because he's going to be the premier back. And I think the other two guys are going to split, what's ever remaining between them. So yeah, I'm going to say he's going to go down slightly, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes up to like 6.5 next season as well.
And I've got it going up about a half a yard. I think he's going to be in the 6.4 range. He had 156 carries last year. 7.3 by Dwayne McBride of UAB led the nation last year. And so, like you said, he was number 28 nationally. Reggie Brooks, the record holder for a single season, 7.62 is Reggie Bush. Josh Adams, I was looking back at Josh Adams. He averaged 5.9, what Audric Estime averaged in 2016 when they were horrible. The next year, he jumped up a full yard per carry to 6.9 in 2017. And that was even when he kind of faded down the stretch in November, when that whole Heisman, 33 trucking and all that stuff ended up fizzling out toward the end. So I think because of one, Audric Estime is who he is. I think that he's still I think he'll be getting more carries, but he's going to be sharing the load still, I think, out there. And the key is what you hit on, the downfield passing attack. That is going to open things up. It's going to keep teams much more honest. And I think we're going to see some longer runs from Audric Estime and, and other guys for that matter this season, but we'll see some longer runs from him. So I think it's going to go up at least a half a yard per carry to around 6.4, 6.5 this year.
And what also plays a factor into this is, how big do they get up on the teams that they're supposed to beat up on? Because the last thing I want when I'm down, 34-10 or 34-17 is a fat dosage of Audric Estime in the fourth quarter.
Right.
When you need to get some stops. So I think that is also going to be a big factor in it too. Is he going to eat up those crunch yards in the fourth quarter? And that's, not to get kind of off topic, but still relatively in the same topic. That's the thing I want to see out of Marcus Freeman and the running backs coach this year is there needs to be a good rotation where Audric Estime is getting fresh touches in the fourth quarter because he should punish a lot of teams in the fourth quarter. And he shouldn't get bogged down early and then kind of be, lacking in the fourth quarter. There needs to be a good fresh cycle of these running backs throughout the game.
That's where I think there's a lot of very capable bodies in that room. And I think that it can definitely keep him fresh and he can be that closer type guy. I think you're exactly right with that. They can offer a change of pace in a lot of different ways with guys like Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne, Jeremiah Love, Devin Ford. I think they can all contribute. Man, it's like going back and I was watching that Catholics versus Convicts the other day. The the 30 for 30, obviously, about Notre Dame Miami 1988, but seeing like one time it's Reggie Brooks, and then the next time they're rolling in Ricky Waters, and then like Rocket Ismail was so like they had so much talent. They were rolling guys, and they had different speed and different capability, with different positions, and then they even put Eilers in the backfield once and let him run a touchdown in. I think that because of the kind of talent that this team has in that backfield, they'll be able to mix some stuff up and do exactly what you're talking about, kind of keep some legs fresh and do a lot of different things. One of the many things to get excited about for this season. Fill in the blank. It is blank that on the same day, former Notre Dame and Dallas Cowboys offensive lineman Zack Martin earned the coveted Madden 99 rating. There were reports that he might not report to training camp next week until he gets a new contract.
So for me, this is a comical, very Cowboys situation, right? Like Zack Martin has been the backbone of your offensive line for going on a decade now. I think is like he was drafted in 2014, 2015?
9 years going into his 10th season right now.
Right. And so he's arguably been the best guard in football for a decade, right? Like he's got more all-pro nods than he has holding penalties. He makes the Pro Bowl every year. He's, put up with the changing of coaching staffs, the changing of, the
offensive coordinators,
coordinator, all of it. And he's just been the consistent cog in the lineup. And rather than the Cowboys rewarding that, they've kind of put it off. And now that he's, a very blaring, not that people look at the 99 Madden rating, right? Like that's just another kind of cherry on top. But it's like, you should take care of the guy who is basically taking care of that entire offense outside of Dak Prescott. And now that it's time to pay him, you look like an idiot because you're, again, not paying the person who has, shouldered, again, the majority of the offensive line the last decade. And you could say Tyron Smith, but Tyron Smith has been hurt a lot, in and out a lot of seasons. Zack Martin, knock on wood, the guy doesn't get hurt. He's durable. He's just everything that you would need. And the fact that the Cowboys have neglected to pay him for what he's earned is just, to me, a very Cowboys type move.
I had never heard of this 99 rating until yesterday. I guess they only give it to a few players per year. The last guard to get this 99 Madden rating, though, it's been 20 years. Another Dallas Cowboy, the vicious Larry Allen, got it in 2003. Did you know about this Madden 99 before this? Did you know much about this?
Yeah, so it's the only reason I know about it is because I've played the video game some before, and then it's just like a very big deal every year. Like there's like you get presented. I can't remember if you get like some special. You get something like Madden gives you something for being a 99 rating. It's like a gold something, which isn't very, helpful. But there's not very many of them. Last year there was only 4. Who do you think, if you had to guess who the 4 were last year, who do you think they would be?
I saw it, and I have no idea off the like Justin Jefferson, maybe. Did he get one?
This year. He's this year.
He's on this year's? Okay.
He's on this year. Devontae Adams was last year.
Okay.
Aaron Donald, who I think got it again this year.
Okay.
Myles Garrett, which whatever. And Trent Williams, the tackle for the 49ers. I agree with that one as well. But again, there's not many. It's a very coveted thing.
Right. It's a handful of guys per year. And the thing is, Adam Schefter tweeted that Martin is woefully underpaid relative to the market. He signed a 6-year deal 5 years ago in 2018. So he's got 2 years left, but unlike a lot of other players who signed these deals, his play hasn't slipped, and you kind of went through some of it. I mean, the guy has been first team All-Pro in 6 of his 9 years. He's been second team All-Pro the other 2 years. The only year he didn't make first or second team All-Pro was because of injury. It was, like his back was jacked up a few years ago, so like, he played in every game last year, didn't give up a sack, just 12 pressures allowed. 7 other guards are making more money than him right now. So again, it's like, yeah, he signed this deal, but you're talking about a guy who is still 32, performing at an elite level year after year after year, and you got to figure out how to compensate this guy, because he is literally your best lineman. And they've had so many injuries with that line, and it's been so up and down and inconsistent for the last few years. It's like, that's your guy. He's not just your best offensive lineman. He is literally the best interior lineman in the NFL. You gotta figure something out. So
I watched this sweet video because Dak Prescott posted. A lot of people were posting. A lot of the Cowboys players were posting like congratulations to Zack Martin on their Instagrams, and Dak posted this clip of Zack Martin. Basically, they sold the run, and then it ended up being kind of like a swing pass or like a flood pass to the running back or a screen or something, and he annihilates his blocker off the line of scrimmage and then pulls out in front of the running back and annihilates that guy too. It's like,
yeah, I mean,
the guy doesn't miss blocks downfield. It's insane.
Like, he is like, yeah, you see him lead block, like heading busting butt downfield so many times as the lead blocker, like when they have a run, most of the time he's, a big run, most of the time he's involved in it. He's the reason why, because of his blocking. Okay, so Bill Belichick is reportedly on the hot seat in New England if the Patriots don't make the playoffs this year. In the meantime, there's talk now that his longtime friend Nick Saban's legacy could be tarnished if Alabama misses the college football playoff this year. So which of those two things, Belichick hot seat if they don't make the playoffs, Saban legacy tarnished if Alabama's not in the playoffs, which of those two things has more legitimacy to it, do you think?
So I'm gonna disclaimer. I think neither of these have like overall like they're like 20% legitimacy. But if I have to pick which is like more legit over the other, I would have to say that Belichick being on the hot seat if New England doesn't make the playoffs, just because when you say legacy, that is a much longer span, and I feel like dramatic than just saying could be on the hot seat for missing the season, because there's nothing that could really tarnish Nick Saban's legacy at this point. Like he could retire today. He could never make the playoffs again. He could never win a national championship again. And he'll still probably go down as, if it's not, what is it, Paul Bryant, it's Nick Saban, like they're just the greatest coaches probably ever in college. And so nothing's ever going to tarnish Nick Saban's legacy. So I will have to say that even though I don't think it's true that Belichick being on the hot seat if he doesn't make the playoffs has more legitimacy.
Yeah, and I think that his, again, this is reportedly that, the relationship with the owner, Robert Kraft, apparently, isn't great, because Kraft and Brady are so much closer than Belichick. I mean, both of these guys are 71. The interesting thing is Belichick is only 18 wins away from tying Don Shula for the most wins all time in NFL history. So, like, even if if he only gets 9 or 10 this year, and you're Robert Kraft, all that Bill Belichick has done, say they miss say they win 9 games and miss the playoffs, all Belichick has done for the Patriots, and he's 8 wins away from, really 9, I guess, from passing Shula. He needs 9 more wins. That's if he gets to 9 this year. Like, do you want to let that guy walk? Do you want him to potentially go someplace else and get the record, for some other team? Yeah, I don't know that would be what you're looking for. But the problem is he's missed the playoffs in 2 of the last 3 years. And when has it happened? Without Tom Brady, and that's why all this is coming up. And like, he hasn't made many mistakes there in New England, but just such a huge whiff last year. by bringing back Matt Patricia, bringing back Joe Judge, putting them in positions that they had never been in before. You're talking about Patricia was a defensive coordinator before he became the Lions head coach. You make him offensive coordinator. You make Judge the quarterback coach. It was a train wreck. They paid the price. And, now, oh, by the way, you had just drafted Mac Jones in the first round the year before, and that's what you give him as a coaching staff. So, I think that is a big mark against Belichick still. I think that between the two, that is it because of what you mentioned. I mean, Saban's got 7 national championships. He's got more than Bear Bryant had. And, there are the only other coaches in the modern era with at least 3 championships are Urban Meyer, Tom Osborne, Barry Switzer. That's it. In the modern era, they are both GOATs. And like you said, I don't put any real legitimacy to either.
It's a hard word to say.
I know. But between the two, I would go with the Belichick just because there's no way Saban's that Saban's legacy is tarnished just by missing the play. Because for one, they're going to expand the playoff next year, and once that happens, as long as he's there, they'll be in.
Like,
every
how
year.
can Saban not make it? He's made it like every year when there's 4 teams.
Right. Exactly. So if Belichick does end up on the outside with the Patriots, though, and Dallas doesn't at least get to the NFC Championship game this year, scale of 1 to 10, how strongly do you feel Jerry Jones would go after him?
This would be a 1 out of 10 for me. And I just think Jerry Jones is never going to hire a guy that he ultimately doesn't have control over at the end of the day.
Well,
and Bill Belichick is not ever going to be controlled by Jerry Jones.
Let's remember he danced with that with Bill Parcells a few years back. He gave up some of that control, hired Parcells, and Bill Parcells is the reason Tony Romo went undrafted. Parcells and Sean Payton found Romo. Romo could have gotten more money actually to sign with the Denver Broncos as an undrafted free agent, but he wanted to go play for Bill Parcells. And you can knock him all you want, but he's still the best post Troy Aikman quarterback that the organization has had. And there are a lot of other guys that Bill Parcells drafted. I think with the age that Jerry Jones is at, he desperately wants that last championship. I give this a 6. I think that he could be willing to dance that dance for a couple years. He could dance that dance for a couple years. Yep. That's right. Dreams are for rich people. That's very fair. That's very fair. Back to Bryan Curtis, who we had on at the start of the show. D. Troll Hunter was asking if he is the real estate guru in Iowa. I would say no. He is not the Iowa real estate guru. We were talking about Brent Musburger in that Bryan Curtis interview. He said that Musburger is available. He did the Raiders radio broadcast last year. The reason he did the Raiders radio broadcast is because he retired / was, I think, kind of, pushed out a bit by Disney a few years back. Still getting it done down there and doing his sports wagering thing out there in Vegas. I mean, that would be a good broadcast. Brent Musburger and Mike Mayock. I think that would be hard to disagree with, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think that Raiders radio is still where he's going to be. Brandon says Chris Fowler is the worst. Where are you on Chris Fowler as the lead play-by-play? He is essentially like the top dog when it comes to college football in terms of announcers.
Yeah, I like Chris Fowler. I think he's got a great voice. I think he's predominantly non-biased. And I definitely prefer him over Kirk Herbstreit.
They work together. It's like, if you're going to compare him to play-by-play guys, it's like Brad Nessler, Jack Collinsworth, some of those kind of guys.
Yeah, I don't have anything wrong with Fowler. I think, again, he does a good job, and his voice isn't one of those ones that feels like it's just jabbing you in the ear. It's just kind of, it's like nice and I guess you could say rhythmic.
Yeah, I mean, he's a different kind of announcer. He's a little less traditional, because he spent so long doing college game day and wasn't doing a whole lot of games over the years, like a Musburger or a Keith Jackson before him, or a Vern Lundquist and Kevin Harlan's and those kind of guys. He's different. He's not bad, but to me, like I was talking about with Bryan Curtis, like Joe Buck, that's a big game announcer voice. Al Michaels, that's a big game announcer voice. Mike Tirico, even, that's a big game announcer voice. Like Fowler lacks that to me because he's come a little bit less traditional route to get into that number one play-by-play booth, I think. So I think he's good, but I definitely I'm not as high on him, I guess. And then Anthony says Fowler and Herb Street stink. Holly Rose, the best part of that broadcast. So there you go. All right, Jess. Appreciate it. Good stuff.
It is storming hard here all of a sudden.
Is it? It was not storming hard here earlier. It was raining. We got some decent rain here in town, but it was dark earlier. That's for sure. All right. Well, we will be back for the 5:00 rapid fire show tomorrow to conclude the week. Will you be here tomorrow, Jesse?
I should be here, barring no setbacks.
All right. I believe Vince is supposed to be here, so that means 3-man booth to close things out on Friday. Appreciate it, and of course appreciate Bryan Curtis as well. And be sure to hit that like button on your way out tonight. And of course, on your podcast platforms, you know what to do. Subscribe, rate, review. That's what you have to do. We will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.